Dean.
Mr Speaker, this is an interesting question which is raised for us and the Local Government and Environment Select Committee in the South Taranaki District Council Cold Creek Rural Water Supply Bill, because it is a little unusual for a water company to use a local bill method to gain ownership of this company. And I think that there are some concerns raised around the House this afternoon which we will address very carefully in the Select Committee. Now, it seems to me from hearing the debate and having a look briefly at the bill, and obviously we will be having a much closer look as this goes through the Select Committee process, and I thank and acknowledge other members for supporting this bill through to Select Committee, even though they may have some misgivings for it. I think looking at the background and the history of this scheme, it's like a number of rural water schemes all throughout New Zealand. The farmers of the day, and this is the mid-1980s, and gosh, there are groups of farmers who have been constructing rural water schemes for over 100 years in New Zealand, and so a group of farmers get together, identify a source of water, and in this case have constructed a water race which services 126 odd, if I read the, beg your pardon, 162 connections. So it's a relatively small rural water scheme used for stock water and for drinking purposes. And while it is true that this rural water scheme had the benefit of a dollar-for-dollar grant from the central government of the day, it has effectively been owned, if you like, and managed by the local management committee. And so now they seek to have that ownership confirmed in a company that they have formed for the management of their rural water scheme. And thinking about it, my first thoughts on it are that it is not dissimilar to a number of irrigation companies and a number of irrigation schemes which I am surrounded by in the Waitaki electorate, particularly on the Waitaki River catchment. And I think there are similarities for the following reasons. We are talking about water infrastructure. The consent to take and use water is done by the Taranaki District Council, Regional Council, and that is the same for an irrigation scheme. So we're talking about a intake system, and it might be out of a riverbed, I don't know. In this case, a water race, connections, goes into stock water, goes into home supply. In this case, it's gravity fed, I'm assuming, so it's it doesn't have the expense of having to pump water. But to me, there are a lot of similarities between what is quite normal practice in New Zealand with water infrastructure. And we need to remind ourselves that we are talking about water infrastructure. We're talking about pipes and pumps and water races and other equipment which is used to maintain and develop that system. We're not talking about water as such. And so, to me, I think we need to be very careful that we don't allow ourselves to get sidetracked into the issue of privatisation of water, which does not rightly belong in the context of the argument of this bill. And I think, and the member across the House mentions ratepayers, and I think we also need to remember that the owners of this water scheme are also ratepayers. And so instead of being rated for the maintenance of this infrastructure, they will in fact pay for it by direct means because they are the beneficiaries and they are the users. So I don't actually accept the argument as advanced by the opposition. Mr Speaker, the Local Government and Environment Committee will give this local bill its due consideration. I want to thank the Honourable Chester Borrows to bring this to the House on behalf of the Taranaki District Council, and we look forward to some good and useful debate on this issue. Thank you.
Cool. Andrew Little.
Mr Speaker, it's